Modernism started in the late 19th century until the mid-20th century. Modernism refers to the complete or radical change from the old beliefs and old artistic movements in literature. It's a change or a disruption from the Victorian way of doing or morality. It is a representation of the chaotic picture of society. Factors that led to the emergence of this movement: industrialization, rapid growth of cities, the horrors of two world wars. It marked a loss of faith in God, government and the human's goodness. This resulted in a greater focus on the individual. The scientific roots: Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, Friedrich Nietzsche. These men of scientists have contributed in the emergence of this movement, which means they prepared the ground for modernism to emerge. Darwin and Marx, both of them contributed in the loss of faith.
Darwin, since the movement was about breaking off from the old ways, he sought to overturn previous ways of thinking about humans, history and the universe. Marx, he denounced the exploitation of men, whether during the World War or during the daily life. Sigmund Freud: when we talk about Freud, the first thing that comes to our minds is psychoanalysis. We have ID that represents desires, instincts, superego that represents the moral side, education, ego that represents reality principle. Friedrich Nietzsche, he wrote a book called The Twilight of Idols. He tells us to destroy the current ideas that we currently have in order to give birth to the Superman inside us, and mainly this Superman is free, so he is talking about freedom. He criticized Socrates. The artistic roots: 1. Impressionism. It is an artistic style. It started in France. Impressionists seek to capture a feeling or experience rather than depict accurate depiction and perfection, so they are more into feelings. 2. Expressions. It is an art of expression to convey meaning and emotions. Each artist has his, her own way of expressing their emotions. It is against depiction. 3. Futurism. It is originated in Italy, Italian origins. Those who belong to this movement discarded the art of the past. They celebrated the future, which means the development. It is a radical change from the old beliefs, which means they neglected the old beliefs and they wanted something new, which is to celebrate the future, in this case of futurism. 4. Dadaism was a reaction to World War I. In the principles of this movement, we find a lot of nonsense in order to show how meaningless modern life. 5. Cubism. It is a rebellion against the objective and logical emphases of the previous period. It places an emphasis on the subjective mental experience. Artists include their experience within their work. It does not matter if it is in a writing, written work or spoken work, or even something that is related to painting. So, this cubism is mainly known for the paintings. If we want to talk about characteristics, first of all we have plot. In the plot we have few characters. Plot is fragmented, which means it does not follow the chronological order. For example, you start in 1920 within a story, then you go until 1939 and you come back to 1925 and you come back to 1921 or 1920. It means it is fragmented, it is broken. There is something called reminiscences, which is related to memories. It is the ability to recall or remember something about the past. Themes: past intrusion into the present, which means some events that have happened in the past, usually they come back in the story. Search for the truth/happiness/joy/comfort. The characters of the modernist work seek the truth, happiness, joy and even comfort. Failure/misery/death. These characters usually fail. They live in misery and usually ends with death, decay and destruction. The setting is mostly to be like a decayed setting and destroyed one. 5. Paralysis. After the war, when the war ends, nothing moves, absolutely nothing. You have no economy, you have no house, you have no family, so everything is static, nothing moves. 6. Delusionment. After the end of the war, firstly there is nothing moves and everyone is disappointed, because if you take the victorious people and those who lost the war, they thought they will fight for the victory, and at the end they lose the war, they lose their homes, they lose their economy and a lot of things, so they are disappointed. This feeling of disappointment is called delusionment, and it is found in the modernist works. 7. Madness. In William Faulkner's novel, As I Lay Dying, there is someone's mom who died and her coffin floating on the water. Her son Vardaman says his famous statement, "My mother is a fish." The character here is insane, but it leads to something else. Not only the theme here is madness, but it is symbolic. This is also absurd. Absurd in also another theme found in modernist works. When something is absurd, it is something that cannot be accepted by your mind. It is something irrational. It is not logical. It cannot be accepted. 8. Loss of faith/rebellion. You will find characters losing faith in God, government and even in human goodness. And since the movement itself is a rebellion, so you will find rebellions in the themes. 9. Alienation. You will find some of the characters change their point of view or their feeling about something. For example, a character used to love someone and they change. They are not loving that person anymore, or maybe they used to feel good with their families and one day they are not, and then they leave the house, and you will have plots, subplots and so forth and so on. 10. Fragmentation. Something that is broken, something that does not follow the chronological order. 11. Primitivism. It is the famous thing they said. If we understand the primitive men, we will understand the modern men. 12. Legends. The absurd legends basically might be found in every movement, not all of them, but basically. Then we have the absurd, like something that cannot be accepted by one's mind. Style. 1. Flashbacks. The writer uses flashbacks. Sometimes the story starts in the past or with something that is not set in the time of the story itself. For example, the story happens between 1960, 1920 and 1930, but the beginning of the story will start, for example, in 1817. This is what we mean by flashbacks. You go back into the past, but this has a purpose, of course, in order to give you a piece of information. 2. Unreliable narrator. Sometimes the narrator has a problem with the character in case the narrator is within the story. So, you cannot trust the narrator because he has a distorted opinion about something, about an event, so they might change it. This is what leads to another point, that is, readers contribute to the meaning of the story. 3. The readers contribute to the meaning when you know that you cannot trust the narrator, which means you have to deduce the meaning. This leads also to multiple narrators as well. 4. Multiple narrators. You have a lot of narrators. This is in order to give the reader different points of views. 5. Repetition. Many things are repeated during the overall story. 6. The hero is lonely/withdrawn, unintellectual, psychotic, struggling and fighting. The hero is usually lonely or withdrawn, and sometimes he is psychotic and intellectual at the same time. This hero usually struggles and fights, but at the end he fails. When we talk about the move of the story, you will start with a hard situation, then there is a struggling, misery, and at the end, there is failure. 7. Symbolism. For example, the character of William Faulkner in his novel says, "My mother is a fish." For us, the first time we hear about this we can say it is absurd and madness, but it symbolizes something. Language. 1. Complex. 2. Dense. 3. Elliptical. 4. Difficult. They use this kind of language in order to search for new artistic ways. Now we will talk about some of the authors of the movement. First we have T.S. Eliot. He was very smart and talented. His poems are amazing and outstanding. He wrote The Hollow Men, The Waste Land, which is absolutely related to modernist literature. Modernism is known for this piece of work. Second we have James Joyce. He is an Irishman from Dublin. He is mostly known for his novels, though he wrote poetry sometimes, plays and essays. He wrote Dubliners, Finnegan's Wake, and Ulysses. He is one of the most important writers of the movement, of course. At last we have Virginia Woolf. She was an important pioneer of the stream of consciousness technique, though the mind of an average person was not considered interesting or important enough by earlier writers to merit elevating it. To elevate this concept to art for Woolf and for other modernists, it was the most important thing, the best subject a writer could choose. She wrote A Room of One's Own, Orlando, and many other of works.